right, good morning. My name is Aaron Brown.
And I'm Dr. Larry Heiner. Morning, Aaron.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good. Ready to get started?
I am indeed.
All right. So today's webinar, we have some few items we would like to discuss. So Dr. Larry, we have, is your business a learning organization?
Mm-hmm.
Creating a return on expectation, we like our acronyms, ROE.
Right.
4 major business problems solved through learning organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, how team cohesiveness impacts business results.
Great.
And Dr. Larry, if you can, kick things off for us, and what is an intentional learning organization?
Yeah, as organizational psychologists, we've been talking about learning organizations for many years. As a matter of fact, Peter Senge wrote The Fifth Discipline in the early 90s, 1992, I think it was first released, in which he was talking about learning organizations. And his book was actually very popular, a national bestseller, and it showed up on all the managers' shelves, but not everybody read it completely, and certainly didn't quite understand what a learning organization would be. So there were a lot of attempts at then creating a learning organization, because everybody was saying, wow, that sounds good. Let's have a learning organization. That sounds like a great thing to do. Since we're coming up on a new century in the 1990s, that sounds great. So, but they weren't quite sure what that meant. Did it mean, just arranging a lot of training? Okay. Did it mean developing a learning and development department, a training department in their organization? Did it mean hiring outside consultants to do stuff? So it wasn't quite well defined. What is a learning organization? And over the last 25 years or so, we've been able to identify that a little more and define it a little bit better, what a learning organization is. From our perspective at Workforce Equanimity, our perspective is that a learning organization is when everyone in the organization is continually learning and growing. Now that certainly needs to be aligned with what the corporate goals are, because a company exists in order to meet those goals and to make money or to have an impact on society, whatever they're doing. But so they have to have those goals that they're trying to reach, but everyone's learning and developing themselves and as a team moving forward. And we're going to talk, I think, a little bit more about that. The intentional part that we add to it is that it doesn't just happen. Okay, you have to pay attention to it at many different levels, including compensation, including hiring. There's a lot of things that need to be done around the organization. The entire organization needs to go through a transformation, not just a learning and development department. Does that make sense?
It does. I appreciate it. So it's not just plug and play. It's a little bit of work that needs to be done, it sounds like.
Sure.
All right, so, I'm just thinking for myself, let's say if I was a business owner, and how would I know if I had a learning organization?
Yeah, so the learning organization, as I was talking about, has everyone learning in there. So one of the key marks of it, and I know this from my time, I was working with IBM for about 20 years off and on. But when I was working for IBM, every year we had an individualized learning program or individualized development program that we negotiated with our manager and was approved by our manager. So we knew if we wanted to be advanced from level 7 to level 8, then we knew what the level 8 guidelines were, what the expectations were there, and what we would need to learn to go from 7 to 8.
Got it.
Specific skills, certain knowledge, ways of doing things. And then there were a variety of ways that we could pursue that. Mentoring, taking online courses, taking in-person classes, reading, writing, stretch assignments, all of those things would contribute to that growth. Now that was an annual process there, and at Workforce Equanimity we recommend doing it a little more frequently than annual.
Absolutely.
It's more of a continual process. But I think that's a hallmark. If you're going to take one measurement, if you're going to look into an organization, does everyone in the organization have an individualized learning plan or development plan for themselves? That's one key marker. There are other things too that show that we can talk about later.
Nice, good share. Because for myself, I think about the days of let's do more training, more training, get more bodies in the class, but that doesn't really give us the impact that we're looking for.
Right. We need to be able to tie it to those business results.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking of my 12 years of being a trainer, something that my stakeholders consistently would ask me for is, Aaron, where is the ROI? Where is my ROI? ROI, ROI. And there's an acronym, ROE, that I hear often from you. And can you expand a little bit about what the ROE is all about?
Sure. So ROI, certainly everybody, every department, everyone in the organization, all of those areas are investments, right? So they have to show some kind of return on that investment. But it's really difficult to pin it to that. So we start talking about, rather than a return on investment and really monetizing that into dollars and cents, sure, you can do some of that, but it's really hard to get to the dollars and cents. So return on expectations, then you start really defining what it is that you want as a business result. It's an expectation. So when you were doing your training work, for instance, I mean, how was it that you were measuring the impact of your training? What would you do?
Well, the top two, we utilize surveys, and then also being in a sales environment, following the number, looking at the result.
Okay. So in the first one, you talked about survey. What kinds of things did you ask in the survey?
The ability to retain the subject that we discussed in the workshop last year.
Okay. So from one perspective, you're just looking at the training itself and how effective the training is in terms of transferring a particular skill or a set of knowledge, and whether or not a person gets it. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Then you're also looking at the far end of the business result, like did sales go up?
Correct.
Or not. How many other factors besides your training would impact sales?
Hiring, promotions, holidays, what's in stock, what isn't in stock, the weather, various different aspects could put the play to that.
Right, and whether you get a phone that the battery blows up on.
Right.
So all of those things, if it's a holiday season, there's seasonal impacts on all kinds of businesses. So if you're looking at sales numbers, it's not necessarily just having to do with the training.
True.
So it's hard to say that your training had an impact then on the actual sales numbers, because there's so many influencers to that. So that's where the dollars and cents break down, and where you can start setting expectations about how the people are going to behave in that situation, your salespeople, how they're going to behave, and then do some work back from there. And we could talk more about that a little bit later too, if you like.
Nice. Sounds good. So there are 4 different business results that we like to talk about here at Workforce Equanimity. So we have innovation, succession and retention, manager competency, team cohesiveness, which guess what, we're going to spend a lot of time wrapping this up around that.
Sure.
So a question comes to mind is, are there any business results that are primarily impacted by developing a learning organization?
Yeah, well, as you were mentioning those, coming to mind, like on innovation, as you have a learning organization, as everybody is continually learning new things, they have new experiences, and they're bringing their knowledge and their new skills to the team, right? So they're bringing them back into the organization, and that applies then in the organization. So whether you're talking about incremental innovation, which is just, we're doing this thing day to day, we could tweak this a little bit and make it better. Or you're talking about planning for that disruptive innovation, which is like, we're going to change, the entire industry and put it on its head, like an Uber kind of a thing. Whether you're talking about incremental or disruptive innovation, having a learning organization where everybody's learning and growing and paying attention to new information all the time, that and the systems thinking and all of those things apply to creating an innovative environment. So that's on innovation. What else was on your list?
I'm thinking if we can give us a little bit more of, let's go, we have innovation, succession, and retention.
Succession and retention is excellent. We know that today's worker in particular, now from my generation, I know that the people who are on the audio can't see me, but I'm in my 60s. So
you look 30.
Thank you. You do too.
Appreciate it.
So in that we're in my generation, it was you go to work for a place and you work forever. You got a gold watch and you're retired. Now people are looking for meaning. They're looking for ways to grow themselves, and they'll move. People will move from one company to another, right down the street. So people are on for 6 months, a year, 18 months, and they're getting restless and they're moving if they're not advancing in the organization. Well, you can't always advance them in position, right? But if everybody's learning and moving towards something, if you know that you're moving towards that and you're constantly learning and applying that new learning, then you're more likely to stick around. Nice. And also, as you're developing a pool of people, that was retention. As you're talking about succession, as you're developing a pool of people who are then high potentials for moving into those next level roles, then you can look internally for succession planning rather than always having to look outside for hires.
Nice. Now, I believe as a business owner like yourself, controlling that attrition piece is extremely important to the business.
Extremely. Right.
And then the third one here is a manager competency.
Right. So the manager role under a learning organization really changes. It really changes to a role rather than just looking and reviewing numbers or doing an annual performance review or a periodic performance review. Rather than just doing that, the manager's role really changes into a manager as coach. Coaching along people along their learning objectives and saying, Aaron, you've got this learning objective. How's that going? And you might say, well, I haven't been able to work on that yet. And I may be able to say, well, how about this class you could take or this stretch assignment or whatever? Or do we need to get you a mentor around that or whatnot? So our conversation as manager and contributor becomes much different. So managers become much more competent in this new employee environment of contributors.
Nice. You made me think of a story. So one of my favorite coaches, and I've had many, Wayman Tisdale used to be my basketball coach in '95. And for myself, I wanted to run faster. That was a personal goal of mine.
Sure.
But he gave me specific things to do to allow me to pick up the pace, if you will, running end of the court to the other end of the court. So I agree with you 100% there. And then the last one, which we're moving on to, is the team cohesiveness. Tell us about that one.
Right. And we're actually going to spend a lot of time on it on these webinars this quarter. So we're going to expand into that team cohesiveness even more so. In a learning organization, the emphasis is on the team. As opposed to the individual. An organization can help develop individuals, and you have a lot of talented individuals. But unless they're working in concert, unless they're aligned, unless they're focused on the same vision, then you've just got a lot of high potential people who are doing their jobs individually, and they're doing them very well, but it's not necessarily getting to the goal that you want. Getting back to the manager, that is the manager's competency as well, is team management then. Selecting the right team, making sure that they have what they need in order to complete the task, that it continues to be in alignment with what the departmental goals are and the overall organizational goals are. So in a team environment, we're actually working together and my strengths complement your strengths.
Correct.
So I'm not just a high-performing individual in my silo, and you're not just a high-performing individual in your silo, and the other people around us doing the same thing. We're actually working together and complementing each other on an intentional basis.
Nice.
Right? So that we know that we're doing that. I know what your skills are. You know what my skills are. And you know how it is that we're going to pursue that and complement each other in order to get the team objectives done.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I mean, you can see how that's more effective.
Yeah, and it makes me now think it's in regards to complementing each other, utilizing our strengths together, doing things in unison, getting out of our silos. How does that specifically impact business results?
Right. So, and we get back now to the discussion that we had earlier around return on investment and return on expectations. A guy by the name of Don Kirkpatrick, and probably many of the listeners have heard of Dr. Don Kirkpatrick. Rest his soul. He's gone from us for 2 years now. But his son, Jim, and Jim's wife, Wendy Kirkpatrick, have picked up his legacy and moving it on. But Don, back in the middle of the last century, like 59, 60, was writing a doctoral dissertation on this subject.
Wow.
How is it that business results are impacted by training? And he was saying, how does that happen? And what he did then, that we're still using as a model now, is develop something called the chain of value. Looking at that value chain, he starts with the results and then says, what behaviors are required in order for those results to come about?
Nice.
So what change in behavior, what change in attitude needs to come about in order for that business result to happen? So like in your example about salespeople, what would they need to do differently? What would their attitude need? How would it need to change in their customer relations or whatever? Okay? So in order to change those behaviors, stepping back one more, we say they have to have particular skills. Conversational skills, they have to know things about themselves, they have to estimate things about their customers, they have to be able to represent products in particular ways. So they're going to need particular skills in order to do that, skills and knowledge in order to engage in those behaviors, right? So the training then is tailored to those particular skills. Then when you get to the end and you say the results go up, you can say, well, results go up because of a lot of different factors, and we talked about that. But here I've got a chain of evidence that says the training activities, the learning activities are actually linked through the skills, through the behaviors, to the results and the expected results. So our expectations around their behavior in the place should drive up sales, right? So now we can say logically, we had some impact there. You know, it wasn't just seasonal, it wasn't just, we did have some impact there. So in a learning organization, we're always tailoring those learning activities towards a return on expectations.
There you go. Okay. Yeah. Nice, nice. No two trainings or workshops should be the same.
Right.
They have to be tailored specifically for that outcome.
Sure.
Expectations.
Yep.
So we have been speaking a lot, and thank you, Dr. Larry, for all the insight there. And we'll pause for a moment and see if we have any questions that anyone would like answers to. Moving right along.
Okay.
Let's put up our contact information. So if anyone would like to reach out for with any questions or whatever it might be, we'll have that information up there for them.
Great. Wonderful. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Dr. Larry.